Thank you, Amber, and hello, everyone. As Amber said, I'm Stephen Stromp. In my day job, I'm a research practitioner. I'm not really an instructor. I'm a adjunct instructor, but I'm a research practitioner with a background in both primary and secondary research. And right now, in my current role, I focus a lot on external market trends at Davenport University. And Davenport fits right along with Stucat. It's a private career-focused school in Michigan. And at Davenport, I'm heavily involved in new program development and program review work, as well as strategic planning. But I also, like I said, teach courses. I'm an adjunct on the side. And most often I teach marketing research and business research. And I'm also teaching a marketing strategy course right now. So in addition to that, as you can see, and I should probably put my slide up, that's correct. In addition to that, as you can see, I'm a Stucat author, as you know, of Market Research Essentials, and the co-author of a new courseware that's been out for less than a year, which is Business Research Essentials, which is really, we're focusing on that in this particular presentation. But I'm also excited to announce that I'm currently writing a new courseware for Stucat, which is Strategic Planning and Management, and that will be heavily research-based strategic management courseware, because that's really how I got involved in strategy, was being a researcher first, and you really can't develop strategy without that intelligence, right? So that's kind of a natural progression for me. But I'm really excited to be here today with my longtime colleague, Kathy Aboufadel, and as Amber had mentioned, she is the co-author of Business Research Essentials. Kathy?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I was trying to figure out last night, more than 25 years doing market research. I don't need to say exactly how many more than 25, but a little bit more. I've done it in a variety of industry, but most of my time has been in higher education. And that's been great, because then I've had that opportunity to teach statistics and business research as an adjunct, which has been just a wonderful way to tell students about how research is used in the real world, and to get an understanding of how they understand the research that we do. So as Stephen said, it was a lot of fun this last year to write the Business Research Essentials book. It's very applied, and that's what we'll be talking about now.
So today we really want to talk about why we think it's a good idea to incorporate, or at least introduce, the balanced scorecard into your research classes. So when we were writing Business Research Essentials, and both being research practitioners, we realized that a lot of our work goes into not only collecting and reporting those KPIs, those key performance indicators that are a part of the balanced scorecard framework, but it really is, when we got to working on the book, it really is the basis for most of our day-to-day jobs, that balanced scorecard methodology. We're often asked to spearhead research projects to investigate why a balanced scorecard indicator is down, and then to offer those recommendations, those research-based recommendations. So we think it's important to relay how this works to students, because they will be faced with these same questions in the real world, whether or not they even are researchers, right? So you think of, managers, those who are into market research, but also those marketing managers and managers across all realms of business, right? They will be faced with, digging into these metrics to understand how they can, what strategies they can enact so that they can perform better. And all that research is very important. So in this presentation, we are going to give you tips on how to incorporate the balanced scorecard into your classes. But again, if you really want to embrace this method, and I promise it won't be a shameless plug presentation, but Business Research Essentials from Stucat is a research courseware that is organized, and I think that's pretty unique. It's organized around the balanced scorecard perspectives. So we really wanted to embrace that method as a way to frame research projects, because it is so related to what research practitioners encounter in the real world. And so in fact, in the Business Research Essentials book, there's a chapter devoted to research related to each of the 4 balanced scorecard perspectives. So at the end of this, if you really like this idea and this approach, the Business Research Essentials courseware does make what we talk about today easy to implement, because there's projects around what we're talking about that are pre-designed for you. Now, for those of you not as familiar with the balanced scorecard, don't worry. We're going to give you an overview or a refresher for some of you. We probably have all heard a little bit about that methodology, or we're masters at implementing it. But before we go any further, we want to take a poll to see where everyone is at in terms of their familiarity with the balanced scorecard and whether or not you've used it in a classroom setting. So Amber, it looks like she's launching the poll, and then Kathy will help with interpreting these results. So can't wait to see what the responses are.
I love seeing the data come in. That's the best part. Everyone has done research.
Looks like everyone's heard of it so far.
Yeah. It's nice to see a couple have taught it in a class, but the majority of people have heard about it, but not incorporated it into a class, or have some experience using it, but not incorporating it into the class. So that's helpful. We're going to keep that in mind as we're going forward and talking about the balanced scorecard. So for you, let me see if I can close that there. Good. So I'll just spend like 2 minutes here talking about what the balanced scorecard is. The balanced scorecard is a strategic way to manage a business's performance. So it's top level measure of how's the company doing. And there's always 4 components or areas that are used to help set and manage the strategic goals. So it's pretty common to have several metrics, or also called KPIs, key performance indicators, under each one of these 4 areas. Financial, I think in the old days, your whole business was evaluated on the financial perspective, how much money you're making, what was your net revenue. But that's just one of the components on a balanced scorecard, which is why it's called balanced, because we think all 4 areas are important. So under that finance, you'd have measures of revenue or sales growth. Under the customer area, measures of customer satisfaction, customer retention, number of new customers coming in possibly. And then these 2 other areas are the areas I think that are the ones that are sometimes undervalued. But as part of the balanced scorecard, we say they should be equally valued. The internal business processes area. So this is your operations measures, cycle time for making your products, material cost. There might be post-sales service measures under this area, like the number of products needing repairs or the number of returned. So that's the internal measures of how well you're operationalizing your business is. And the 4th area is innovation. So innovation is also sometimes called the learning and growth area. So this has to do with people, and you might have measures of employee retention and training, employee morale maybe, and also your systems. How much downtime, actually, I put downtime as an example, but I'm going to say that downtime might be better in your internal business processes. But the measures in learning and growth will let you know if your business is in a good shape so that it continue to evolve. So that's the balanced scorecard. And why do we think it's important? Well, we think that all research can fall or does fall into one of these 4 areas, and that this is the scorecard is a way of understanding the scope and breadth of the research world.
So again, as researchers, and this is our theme throughout, is that Kathy and I, we can both equate most of our projects as providing intelligence on how to either improve or maintain KPIs within the balanced scorecard. So research is not only needed to report KPI metrics within each of those perspectives, but those high-level results will also be kind of an impetus for kicking off a research objective. And we really think that's crucial for students to understand. So at the high level, I think it's a great lesson to teach students how the balanced scorecard is used to monitor performance and how that dovetails into developing solid research objectives and developing those sound research plans. So what I just put up is an example, kind of a starting point where you can start to teach this to students and kind of make it real. So one thing that you can do to start is to have students create their own quick balanced scorecard based on a company. So this exercise really helps them understand the concept. So what you can do is have them conduct research and fill in a balanced scorecard, as in this example, with those KPI metrics that they find on their own. So the lesson here is really twofold. It's seeing, can they find some data that relates to the perspective, and did they get the right KPIs in the right perspective? So you can see here, we added that justification. So you can have them justify that metric, and is it really a good fit based on those balanced scorecard definitions that Kathy just gave us, right? Are these metrics that they found a good fit? So this is an actual student balanced scorecard on General Motors. And here you can see we just had them find one KPI, one indicator that fits each perspective. So with this particular example, it doesn't necessarily tell us if these measures are good or bad. It's really just a snapshot, but it's really a good starting point to get them to start to understand the concept. But you could definitely get more complex than this. Maybe this is step one, by having them find several KPIs for each perspective. There's just one here. But beyond that, you can also report on some trends of the KPI. So with the customer, it's a 69% retention rate. Well, what was it in 2020 and 2019? And so you can kind of start to get a trend. You can also benchmark against outside companies. What's the industry norm for some of these KPIs? And that tells us if our particular company that we're researching is good or bad, or how are they doing compared to some of those industry norms. So when we first tried this, we were really dipping our toe into it, and I wasn't sure if it would work. I wasn't sure if students would be able to find a KPI out there just with the resources available, because a lot of companies, they keep some of this stuff private, right? But there is access to this data with public companies, obviously. So I wasn't sure, but we were really pleasantly surprised that how much students were able to find. They were able to find a lot, and they can get this information from the company's website, their financial reporting. They can use library databases at your institutions. So I'm sure you have your own favorite databases and sources. Mine, I'm always talking about IBIS World for industry level information. That's one our library subscribes to. Mergent Intellect is another one that our library subscribes to, that has a lot of information, a lot of company financial information that they can pull some of this down. So check with your library to give students, but students were able to Google a lot of this stuff. I was really impressed, when we got to that point. So for the next step, after some trending and benchmark research, ask students to choose one perspective they feel is either crucial to maintain or one that they have identified as needing improvement, based on those benchmarks. And again, to identify which one makes the most sense, they will have to do that work looking at some trends or benchmarking. So that's an important piece. But once they identify an area that's low, they can then start to develop a research objective. And that's very much, what I love about this is it's very much how identifying research objectives works in the real world. So it's really laying out the process for students. When we get from our leadership a research question or research objective, it's coming based off of this methodology. Something's not quite going right in one of these KPIs. So now I'm going to go through some typical research objectives and their supporting questions for each balanced scorecard perspective. And this is really my favorite. I get excited about this because one thing I have been struggling with for years as a research instructor is students coming up with their own solid research objectives. They just really don't know what a good research objective is, and we can't blame them for that, right? It's their first time. Have you had this problem before? I mean, this is a major problem for me, rather than just giving it to them, having them come up with one. And it sometimes takes me back and forth, takes a lot of back and forth with the student, right, before agreeing on what makes sense as a solid business research objective or marketing research objective. It's been a struggle to the point where I would always argue that we should just give the research objective to the student and have them, give them this canned research project. But with this method, you can still shepherd it in a way, but they are using a framework that really guides them to develop sound objectives. Again, which I really love that because it's based on what really happens in the real world, in the workplace. It's not something, we don't do research just, because we're simply interested in it. That's not what business research or marketing research is. It really needs to support that KPI. So the lesson here is they need to look at the balanced scorecard results and determine where it's necessary to dig deeper. And then again, that becomes our research objective. So the first one is the financial perspective here. And the balanced scorecard makes it really easy. A metric is down, in this case, sales. So, okay, the objective is to determine why sales are down. It's really that easy, and it really clicks for students when we go through this method. So for students, it makes perfect sense. A key indicator is down. Let's research why. So for the supporting research questions, I always like to have a research objective and kind of those, what are we really digging into? We can start thinking about how we can further dig into these issues. What I love about this is you can make this a brainstorming activity where students start throwing out ideas of what they would research. So for instance, one example we give in the textbook is if ticket sales are down for an airline, you can start brainstorming areas to look into, such as, well, let's look at the external environment. What are the latest trends in consumer travel? Let's look internally. Can we disaggregate ticket sales by types of travelers, like business travelers, versus other travelers? Or can we look at ticket sales based on certain destinations? Are there certain route preferences that we need to dig into to understand the issue? So our next example, our next perspective is the customer perspective. And if we stick with that airline example, it might be things like investigating specific areas of passenger dissatisfaction. Are they dissatisfied with if we see that satisfaction is low, are they dissatisfied with the ticketing process? Is it something with the gate agents or friendliness or process? Is it delays? So those types of things that we can kind of dig into. Why are they dissatisfied? And another thing I love about this process, and Kathy pointed this out when we were talking about this, is it challenges the students not to go directly to the research method. We get this every day in our jobs. We need a focus group or we need a survey, and students do this too. It's natural. How are we going to start collecting this information? But we really need to figure out what is that research objective and what are those research questions? And the method comes later once we flesh that out. So it really makes us stop and think, what are we researching? What are we researching and why? So the next one is the internal process perspective. If the KPI here is quality, you can challenge students to think of all the ways quality can be segmented. You can challenge them to think about what are the root causes of why quality might have dropped. And again, this will help flesh out those supporting research questions. Now, I know I just said, I love this because you don't go to the method first, but one method that kind of clicks with this process is to have students research processes at companies that are the industry leaders, right? So if you assign a company, you can have students benchmark the ways top companies in that industry conduct business, which could lead to some recommendations. Of course, we'd want to go through this process first. And then for learning and growth perspective, which is the final one, this is where employee training, satisfaction, and those capabilities Kathy talked about come into play. And again, our research questions dig into how to segment the data to look for clues. So is it a certain department that's dissatisfied, for example, or can we investigate certain areas where job satisfaction is causing this overall decline, such as, is it the compensation and benefits? Is it the communication from leadership, for example? So one tip here is to remind students that research questions are not the same as survey questions. This is another kind of common problem. Although, we might follow up with a survey to dig deeper into these, but we often, again, jump right to that method and the survey and design when we should really be first determining what those issues are to research. So I really like this process for that, which actually then brings us to the research plan. So when we choose, now where we're at the point, we've decided what our research questions are, we need to choose methods to dig deeper into that balanced scorecard perspective or into that KPI. So this slide shows some of the common methods that correspond to each research, that correspond to research objectives within each perspective. Of course, when we look at this, methods are not always clean, right? It depends on a lot of factors which methods you would choose. But these are the ones that we focus on in Business Research Essentials. These are all fleshed out within the textbook because these are the most commonly used that align with research questions within each of these perspectives. Of course, we don't have time to flesh them all out in this presentation, but what I really like about this approach is that we see methods like surveys and focus group across multiple perspectives, right? Because you can use a lot of these tools in multiple perspectives. But what I really like, about the approach in Business Research Essentials is that we really tailored it to each audience. So they become unique tools with their own best practices. So you can see there's a workplace climate survey, which is obviously different from a customer survey, but there are best practices there are things you want to include in a customer survey that are very different from things you would want to use in a learning and growth type of survey. And so those are fleshed out, which I think is a really good toolkit for students to have. So we think it's a great exercise to use the balanced scorecard to teach the research process. So we spent a lot of time about the perspectives and the research objectives, but what's that whole process and how does it all fit and click together, right? So identifying that balanced scorecard perspective that needs improvement is a great first step. Crafting a research objective around that and those supporting research questions, determining those methods, then collecting the data, and ultimately providing strategic recommendations, because that's what this is all about from a research perspective. So how far you take this really depends on your class, right? And Kathy will get into the assignments in a bit, but so how far you take this really depends on your class, particularly when we look at number 4, the collection of data. You might have students lay all this out, but actually not execute, or you might turn this into a semester project where they actually collect this data. And we were thinking maybe that's more for MBA or capstone classes, but I have to tell you, in our undergrad business research class, we actually do a version of this that's guided, but it goes through all these steps. And if you're running a more marketing focused research class, this can be done with that as well, because you can always relate marketing research to a KPI that it's trying to influence. For example, a leading KPI might be number of website hits or leads, and the lagging KPI might be sales or revenue. So, a KPI is going to fit whatever KPI you're ultimately trying to influence. It will fit in one of those 4 balanced scorecard perspectives. So it definitely should be used, it can be used to apply to any marketing or business research project or course. So at the end of this presentation, I'm excited to, kind of look forward to hearing from you how these steps might be used in your research class or projects. But if you don't want to build a whole semester project around this, like I was just suggesting, Kathy is now going to showcase some individual assignments that can be used to get students oriented to this method. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, great. So individual assignments under each perspective. Let's start with the financial KPI area. So I won't read you, it's on the slide, but I'll just give you a little, my thoughts about when you're giving assignments like that. I think either one of these assignments could work well in a business research course or a financial analysis course. So, and when you give an assignment like this, I recommend that you start by providing the context to explain why someone in a corporation might be doing this type of analysis. So for example, you might say that your company is noticing that a key product has been stagnant in their sales for several cycles, several quarters or several years, and you don't know why. So you might want to conduct a market share analysis to understand if the growth is stagnant across all markets, or if another company might be increasing their sales at the cost of your product. And then the segmentation, we do so much segmentation in my job. And so I always like to do a couple of different assignments where students get experience like that. So then for the customer KPI assignment ideas, customer satisfaction surveys I find are really common in industry. You know this from being consumers. You're probably often asked to fill out our survey. Tell us how we did today. So I think it's great to give students practice doing a survey like this. And one way to approach this is to have students think about the different dimensions of satisfaction that might be specific into an industry. So measuring interactions with salespeople or features of a product. What are those overarching areas that might have several questions underneath them? I know that when Stephen teaches this, he always has someone walk through the customer experience from the time they arrive at a restaurant, let's say, to what all those steps are and being a customer there, or arriving at the doctor's office and you go to the waiting room and then you go back to the office, and then he'll design a questionnaire that gets at satisfaction with the whole process. Internal process. The KPI assignment ideas for the internal. So as we mentioned before, people might not always think about those internal processes as being part of a research course. But I think that there are examples, lots of research methods that can be used to address internal process issues. So a mystery shop is a cool idea where you can go and sit down and observe. I think, Stephen, you've done something like this in one of your classes.
Yeah, so for my marketing research class, we do sometimes have students conduct observational research, and you could do mystery shopping this way too, but one tip that I always like to do is coffee shops. I think coffee shops are great because you can have students observe behaviors without looking too creepy, to be honest, right? You can sit in a coffee shop for a while. So that's the last thing we want to do, is have students getting in trouble for being creepy, observing people. So coffee shops are great. But the great thing about this as a real world assignment is not only observing behaviors, which is kind of inherent in observation, right? You observe those kind of nonverbal behaviors from consumers, but for the process piece, you can really see how does that process work. How is your process working in terms of customer service? How is it working in terms of that whole ordering process? If you think of a coffee shop, right, it's just an easy, great example for students to see where are the hiccups, where are the waiting time, where are the issues with this process that can then be improved. So things like, how did the ordering process go? What was the average time it took to make a drink or specialty drinks? There's timing components in there. What about the customer service protocol? We've included that in there. How smoothly did everything go? And again, that's just a really great exercise to uncover suggestions for improvements of a process.
Yeah. And then the learning and growth, which is also called the innovation area. Like the internal process dimension, employee learning and growth is not always top of mind when you think about assignments in a research course. But I found professionally that I am called on to help understand employee satisfaction, their training needs, safety, do they feel safe in the parking lots, and climate quite often. I think climate's an interesting one. It seems to me that over the last few years, Americans in the United States have become more focused on equity and inclusion as it pertains to race and to gender. We're hearing more about these issues. And I think businesses do want to know if their employees from all their backgrounds feel comfortable and welcome in the work environment. So I'd actually be curious for the people here, if you'd write in the comments for me a yes or no, if you have been seeing or hearing in your line of work an increase of research requests or interest in corporate climate. So, because this is my little informal survey of the 20 people who are here today. So, but I think from what I've seen that there is a greater need for workforce climate surveys. So, and by climate, I'm talking about it can be many things, but do you feel safe? Do you feel included? Do you feel listened to? Are there people like you in the workplace? So anyways, so let's try to tie this up in our last slide here. The key takeaways, I think we've tried to be making the point that business research is broad and it has more depth than most people realize. I think the balanced scorecard is a way of showing students the scope of why you might do research. Normally research courses are designed by the methods, which is great, but those methods often cross different areas. So we like the idea of instructors developing products and assignments related to this BSC. perspectives. Stephen, any other
Sure. So,
thoughts? Yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. And just to kind of wrap it up, that was kind of our theme, is that we really like this as an idea of incorporating this so that students can kind of see how this works in the real world in terms of incorporating that balanced scorecard. And again, you might have some companies, they don't necessarily take a balanced scorecard approach, although we think many or most do, but they at least have KPIs that they follow. Like Kathy was saying, it's traditional just to be in that financial perspective, and that they'll have those be your KPIs. But I think that those days, I feel, are gone, and it's really becoming more of a balanced approach. Even though this isn't a totally new concept or method, I just think it's being adopted more often. So I think it's good to incorporate that. And again, it's not, we're overlaying this with our research courses because we see a fit in our daily work, but students should be exposed to this in other courses as well. So hopefully it's kind of a refresher if they see that framework being used in a research class. So we really thank you for attending. We'll probably have some Q&A in a minute, but as a reminder, you can incorporate your own spin on this. We just wanted to give some ideas, but just to kind of wrap up and tell you a little bit more about our book, we do have that whole courseware it's got a semester project, which is wrapped around the balanced scorecard framework. And there's assignments that Kathy talked about. There are like 2 or 3 per chapter of each of those balanced scorecard chapters that also, if you don't want to create your own, that is kind of pre-made for you in this courseware. So I will turn it. Oh, go ahead.
One great question, Stephen, that I think would be a good one to start off.
Sure.
What is the key differences between the market research text and the business research text? And what courses might you recommend each text be adopted to?
Sure, that's a great question. So business research essentials was really developed for those business research classes. We're thinking these are for those in business majors, those going into management. The difference is with this, it's really looking at research that managers use to make their strategic business decisions. Marketing research essentials or market research essentials is great for those marketing courses, marketing research courses. And it's really from a practitioner standpoint, and it's really developed around the research methodologies. It really digs deep into how do you design a survey, and it goes into a lot of detail about each of those methods. Business research essentials is a little more high level. It does have all the methodology in it, but it's really based on how you would use those to answer business or be from a manager perspective. How would you use those from a manager perspective? And I'll have Kathy chime in on that too, since you're the co-author, and we looked at both. So
yeah, I think you did it good. Marketing research is spending more time on developing new products and evaluating products and placement. But it does cover, both texts cover all of the methodologies. The marketing is much more about how to use this data to increase your sales, I think, where the business research is all the different ways you use research in a business.
that's a good, and we can let us know if we need to describe that any further. There is, Amber can put up there's a landing page or a URL that actually describes the differences between each two. There's a website that has that. If Amber could post that, that would be awesome.
So what other, we got a comment about thanks, interesting examples. Thank you guys. What other questions do you guys have? Data sets in the marketing research text. You do have some data sets, don't you, Stephen?
Yes, there are data sets in the market. There's a survey database that is included in the market research essentials courseware where you can, there's a corresponding survey and then all the research. So we have quantitative data that can be used to develop a research report, and also qualitative data where they can code open-ended responses. Okay, now I can see you all.
Ooh, SPSS files. I don't know if you put them in an SPSS format or not,
They are
Stephen.
in SPSS, that is in an SPSS file as well as Excel.
Okay. Oh, Luke, I'm so glad to hear this. Someone who used the Market Research Essentials book.
Oh, good, cool.
Okay.
So yeah, Market Research Essentials is having a new update. The June 2022 version is out with a bunch of new features, and we will keep Business Research Essentials up to date too. Another key difference is Market Research Essentials does not follow the balanced scorecard framework, so that wouldn't be as expected. So it's more geared toward managers who would be used to that framework, right? To business managers, but you can still apply it if you're using that textbook or teaching that class.
I do not understand how this could be a dry course in anything. I think this is the coolest stuff in the world. But I've been told that I'm a little weird that way. I also like statistics. More than one survey in the market research text probably means the database.
Yeah, for the database, there's just the one. It's a brand research survey, but we will probably be adding more. And on top of that, there are really deep, one of the differences too with Market Research Essentials is it deep dives into, I think there's 6 different survey templates that can be used. So what I usually have students do is collect their own survey research, right? So using one of those templates, we have a brand survey, a customer satisfaction survey, an advertising testing survey that has templates in there where they can modify the template and know what the proper sequencing is and what the types of questions are. And then what I have them do is go out and collect mock surveys and then analyze those on their own. So that's kind of how in my courses we get that database, is they collect it on their own. But then they also get the experience of developing those surveys using those different, and we just added the new one, which was the ad testing scorecard survey for the June 2022 launch. Yeah, I'm excited about the templates, and I think those are a good, I think those are a great use, because when we get students in class, and we do have some of these in Business Research Essentials too, when you get particularly with the types of little different types of research that we would do in business research versus marketing research, but you ask students to create a survey, they don't know where to start, right? So it's just with the years and years of experience I've done writing these surveys, it's kind of a collection, greatest hits of survey design, right? What's the proper sequence? What are the common types of questions that are asked within those surveys? I think StuCat will. I will, Jim, that's a great, yes, we will get it. They will get something out with the updates. I think they usually do. If someone from StuCat can jump in, there are they usually do have a website that details all the changes that go through for each year. But I also, if you're a member of the StuCat professor group, if you're not, I suggest that you join it on Facebook, because I am always there posting what the latest updates are, so you can grab it there too.
Thanks, Jim. We appreciate questions and comments. You know how us professors are, we need feedback.
Oh, thanks, Chad. Chad did post some updates.
Good.
Yeah, I think it would, Shannon, I think it would work great for a capstone class for sure. You know, I think these books could be used in tandem too. We think that BRE, Business Research Essentials, is probably a little higher level. So if you want someone to really learn research methods, go with Market Research Essentials. But if they're a little higher up, or you're doing a business or management class or a capstone class, they work really well together, because Market Research Essentials goes through all of those detailed methods that you really learn, and then you can apply them in Business Research Essentials, which does give you a little refresher, but then now it's from a decision-making and management perspective. So I think it really works well as either a capstone class for an MBA class, or for those business and management classes, if you're trying to peel apart the two and have a marketing research curriculum and a business research curriculum.
Have you done focus groups, Stephen, in your marketing research class?
Yes, we have. We've done some with course clients, and we've also done some with mock, where we have them do, so both techs have have some templates for doing moderators guides. So what I do in my class is have them break them out into teams, give them a research objective, have them come up with a moderator's guide using those templates. Again, I love the templates, but they have to shift a little bit based on what the research objective is. And then they will kind of switch and have one team, be the participants, and then the other team run the focus group. But we've certainly done that with course clients before to get a little more real world with it.
Okay, they might be running out of questions.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and interrupt you for a second. If you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat while we have Stephen and Kathy here with us. I do want to let you know that both Market Research Essentials and Business Research Essentials pair with our simulation Mimic Market Research. And we will be having a simulation walkthrough of that this afternoon. So if you're interested in pairing that with either of the coursewares, please swing by. We're happy to answer any questions you might have about the simulation and how it compares as well. Stephen also mentioned that you can use Market Research Essentials and Business Research Essentials in tandem in your classroom. And if that's something you're interested, feel free to reach out to one of our course consultants, and we're happy to talk to you about that and kind of give you an idea of how those could work together. It doesn't. Oh, here we have another one. Market Research Essentials offers templates currently. If so, how do we access those? Luke, we offer free instructor access to our courseware. So if you schedule a demo with our course consultant, one of them can give you that instructor access and you can take a look at all the research and the resources that are in the courseware.
Luke, are you using that? Are you using Market Research Essentials now and you just need to know where to find them? They're in a couple different places. So I think it's chapter 5 has those survey templates. There is a special student resource within chapter 5 if you click on resources or student resources, and I believe they're also in the instructor resources as a separate download that you can grab all of those documents. And again, we just added a couple new ones so if you go into June 2022, which will be the newest one released, there's even more templates included in that one. But it's in the resources folder, so it's not really nested with the chapter stuff. Yeah, I'm really excited about that was the #1 thing when I wrote Market Research Essentials, is I really wanted to include those templates because it's just those, years and years of best practices where you look at a survey, a student, that's their best attempt, right? But they really don't know what's the proper framework for this type of, if you're doing a brand research, if you're doing customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction, what are those key components that you need? And the ordering is so important too, and which ones are blind and which ones are not blind. It just gives them a really good resource to start with.
We do have another question, Stephen. Lewis is asking if market research covers anything regarding data mining.
Yes, although I think we covered it more in Business Research Essentials. Kathy, I'll have you.
Yeah, we mentioned it, and well, Stephen mentions it in Market Research group. We a little more detail, a chapter on data mining and business intelligence in the Business Research Essentials. Very high level, definitely an intro. I wondered if I need to beef it up next year, but
yeah, we'll probably delve a little more deeper into that. It is mentioned in Market Research Essentials. It's a little deeper in Business Research Essentials.
Making sure they understand the terms and how and when and where you'd use those methods.
Awesome. Stephen and Kathy, thank you so much for being here today. I can tell by the engagement that everyone is super excited about both of your courseware. So we will help dive a little deeper into that. We dropped several links in the chats for all of you, so please feel free to check those out. Business Research Essentials is a super exciting courseware for anyone looking to become a business professional and learn how to make those strategic decisions. So thank you both so much for that.